Hello and welcome everyone to this pre-recorded webinar about Pixelz AI Unveiled. I'm here with our CTO, Janus Matthesen, and our R&D Leader, Sébastien Eskenazi, and they're here with me to answer your most frequently asked questions about AI that we've gathered from past Flow events and also from our AI-focused recent webinar. We're going to dive into the AI for visual post-production and also into the behind the scenes of how Pixelz works with AI. So before I do any other spoiler, should we start?
Sure.
Yes, let's do that.
Let's go. So the first question is, what is actually AI and what is scripted automation in your production? How much data is required to train an AI?
Yeah, good question. I will say it's very hard for us to basically distinguish what parts are done by AI and what is done by more, you could say, traditional code. One thing I can say is that all the AI models we have work very closely together with traditional code, and I think this is probably the case in all AI related products and tasks. So usually, basically, it's about choosing the right thing to do with AI and the right thing to do with more traditional code. Because if you don't, it's just more costly and usually will produce a worse result. So it's hard to say precisely, but very interlinked. And towards the question about how much data is required, there's many different ways you can train an AI. One thing that's very popular right now is taking a model that's already trained and then doing what's called fine tuning. And I hear examples where you can do that maybe all the way down in our example to maybe a few hundred images. But for the AIs, I think all the AIs we're using, we trained them from the ground up ourselves. And a rule of thumb we have is that we can do a test with around 10,000 images to test the idea and see if there's a chance it will work. With 50,000 images, we normally get a working prototype. And once we really end up with the final model, we are usually at 100,000 plus images.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Janus, except for one thing. We do use pre-trained models. That's a lot easier.
Okay, sorry.
That's all right. I think also one thing to be aware of is that training an AI can be seriously expensive, especially the research part of how to train the AI, because depending on your task, there's a question about that. And so one thing we do consider is, depending on the impact of the AI, we're going to train it on more or less data. For instance, if it's something with tiny impact, then we're fine with 50,000 images or less. But of course, for something like our mask, we definitely go above 100,000 images.
Nice. Let's move on to the second one. How would we leverage multiple AIs to create product images?
Yeah, so first of all, with multiple AIs, I think for us, we have this production system we call SAW, where we basically split the process of editing an image into different steps. And some of those steps are done by human retouchers, others are done by computers, and we basically, depending on what needs to be done on the image, we can put these steps together. So for us, that's how we would use multiple AIs through the process. And then I guess here we specifically say to create product images. For that, it sounds a bit like generative AIs. And I would say for us right now that's we don't use that to create product images, and that's simply because we have a very strict requirement from our clients that we cannot change the product. And right now, there's not great solutions for the generative AIs to make sure they don't also, of course, they can change everything around the product, and they will usually also change the product. So I'll say for creating product images, it's a bit harder.
Is there a way to ensure that generated product images are always identical?
That's an interesting question, but when you know AI, you also know the answer. No. If you use AI alone, it's, I would say, impossible. Of course, it always depends on your definition of identical. One thing you learn also when you work with AI is that words, the definition of particular words such as identical can have a lot of impact how you define it based on, then it impacts your performance and your answer to this kind of question. But what we could look into that is definitely more reliable is taking an original product images and somehow inserting it in a generated images. That is something like that's possible. We can warp, retouch these images together to blend them together, and then you get what you would want, which is a kind of generated product image that is always identical and truthful to your original product, which is really, I think, the key element here.
Interesting. Does masking AI work on different color backgrounds or complex ones?
Well, that was one of our early challenges many years back now, where our masking AI would only work on white backgrounds or bright backgrounds. But now we trained it enough, and it works on practically all kinds of backgrounds, both studio and some outdoor backgrounds as well.
Yeah, I think it's maybe worth adding. I think our AI for masking is made for our purpose and trained on our type of images. So definitely ours works really well on professional product photography. But I'm sure there's use cases where it probably does not work as well. And for instance, I can imagine that Snapchat will do a lot better job than us if we're talking about a selfie or something like that. So I think it's worth also knowing that the AI in general, AIs are also trained for some specific or with some specific data, you could say. So
Right.
yeah.
The next one is, how do you handle quality control? How do you manage variations between multiple retouchers working on one job?
Yeah. So this is actually something we've been looking a lot into and investing quite heavily into. Of course, because we have this way of working where we split the retouching into multiple steps, that adds some extra complexity to this for our case. So in our case, we actually have quality assurance after each of these steps. This also allows us to give super quick feedback. If we're doing something wrong, we can fix it right away instead of producing the whole image. Some of these QA steps are actually also done by AI today. And then we also have different what we call consistency features built into our system. So for example, on certain steps where we know it's important, we will take all the images of one product and assign them to one retoucher. So they will, in many steps, we will have individual different retouchers working on the different images, but on some steps, we will have one editor working on all the images of that product. On top of that, we can trigger these, we call it a consistency panel, where the editor will have access to other images that are edited on the same order, or even other images that are edited for the same client back in time, in the same category, you could say, and so on. So we have several different features to address both quality and consistency.
Nice. And the next one is, what will you never try to automate?
Well, I think that we'll never try to automate the part that our customers want to keep doing themselves, because we'll never be doing it. But no, more specifically, the creative part of the job that comes from our customer, the one about deciding what to do, that one we probably won't be doing. Although I think it's also good to be aware that we're looking into doing automation for our editorial team. So AI and automation, we expect that they can actually go quite far in terms of ability to create quality content.
Good, we'll see.
Yeah.
Do you recommend any prep work during shoot or file prep before sending them to Pixelz to ensure AI is more effective in the photo editing process?
I'll say we don't require any prep work. We try to make our systems fit with the different processes and different work that's being done in the studios we work with. So there's no requirement as such, but of course there is all the normal things, I would say, good lighting, good backgrounds, being in control of your studio, the basic traditional stuff you would do even if you are not editing with AI. I would say it's the same thing. I have been involved in a few projects. One come to mind where we really had to optimize the editing quite a lot, and this was a client who was shooting on mannequins. And here we actually, together with the client, we agreed that they would use the same mannequins in all they had different setups around the globe, and they would use the same mannequin, and that allowed us to basically train an AI to detect that mannequin. And once we did that, we would also know exactly how wide was the shoulders. We would know all the measurements of the product, and suddenly this allowed us to do even further automation. And of course, in cases like that, then we would go in and agree on a certain specification, like in this case the mannequin. But yeah, I think that's what comes to mind for me.
Very cool.
Yeah. On my side, I'd say that, like Janus said, same as normal post-production, only be aware that AI is a bit less forgiving, so it can have actually a bigger impact. And for instance, for Ghost Mannequin, on the automation has such an impact when a product insert, like the inside part of the product, is properly put on a mannequin rather than just shot flat or shot hanging with the hands. It makes a world of difference on the ability to automate such kind of tasks.
That's an interesting one. What are the plans for generating video with AI?
Yeah, I guess if the plans is directly related to Pixelz, I would say it's on the playing around stage. If it's more in general, I would say there is already AIs out there that can generate videos. One of the bigger, more well-known one is called Runway, and it's fun to play around with. I'll say it's still behind the generative AIs for images. And in many cases, for our use case, even the generative AIs for images is probably not production ready yet. So I would say the playing around stage is where it's at for us. But amazing, it's fantastic. I always say I've seen examples where it's a little bit like those Harry Potter image or pictures they have where the people in the pictures are actually moving, and now that's possible with something like Runway. So it's an amazing technology.
We'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
Is there any way to make an apparel image in symmetrical shape by AI?
Yes and no. Yes, there is a way to do it automated, but we don't need AI for it. I mean, we need some AI to do an initial mask, but we have that. It's not really the AI that does the shaping. But we are actually working on that, and we get some pretty good results. I'm pretty happy with the results we have. And the challenge about this is the same as what it would be for a human retoucher, especially. So it's basically if what the input image to retouch is heavily not symmetrical. For instance, you've got one arm down, one arm to the side. Obviously, it's not going to work. Things like fur or fluffy garments, that's also very challenging to retouch. But other than that, it's doing okay. And internally, one big challenge we had was to find algorithms that have a quality that is good enough. So that was a big challenge. We actually made our own algorithms in the end. But the point here is that we couldn't find anything off the shelf that was good enough. So yeah, doable, but you need the team that can do it.
The next one is, can your AI read brand tags, sizing from low-quality user-generated content?
Yes, I'll say there's different levels to this question as well,
Right.
and different challenges. I'll say, first of all, low quality. It depends on how low. There's certainly a threshold there where basically it can't be detected anymore. I think there's also a lot of challenges when it comes to user-generated content. And as an example, if we talk about reading tags and sizing and stuff like that, I could easily imagine some users shooting a product where you can see the tags, but doing it on top of another product where you can also see the tags. And often for us as humans, if you can see, let's say, a whole t-shirt, but it's lying on top of a pair of jeans where you only see part of it, for us as humans, it's pretty easy to say, okay, it's probably the t-shirt we're talking about here, and then deciding that's the data we're going for. For an AI, again, this is much harder, and it will often look for instance, for tags, and it will find two tags, and all of a sudden it might, in worst case, it might start mixing them up and saying this t-shirt is large because the pants are large, and so on. So there's definitely a lot of different challenges related to user-generated content as well. And of course, a lot of that you can, in a studio, you can decide how you shoot. You can decide there's only one product in the image and stuff like that. So that would help fix some of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
I think also if this is just about recognizing text, while we don't have something for that at the quality that's good enough in-house, there are actually many tools off the shelf that do it pretty well. And if a customer needs that, well, for us, it would be relatively easy to integrate that into our system to just provide that service. It's not that complicated, the integration part. So, yeah.
Right. Maybe we can provide these examples then afterwards so that people know and can check them out. So the next one is, how does the cost of AI compare to traditional post-production?
It depends a lot because you see, the financials are different. Traditional post-production is very low entry cost, very low setup cost. You just hire the people and they get to work. But if you have to train an AI in-house, you're gonna put a few tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, hundreds of thousands of dollars to just get started. If you want to create a CGI model, you're looking at thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, probably just thousands of dollars, to create that model initially. So then you have a pretty heavy entry cost. But then, of course, the cost of running it is significantly cheaper. So that on the long run, it's definitely worth it. That's the one thing. Something else I noticed is in some cases, for instance, if you look at jewelry, it makes so much sense to use CGI or AI compared to real photographs, because when it takes you just a whole day to shoot one watch, and you realize if you had done it in CGI, all your design team, or all your marketing team, or all your content team could work with the CGI models, which are really good for things that don't move, like jewelry. Then it makes complete sense to go this way. And I know that, well, a very famous brand, Van Cleef and Apples, they do that. And yeah, I mean, they have Van Cleef and Apples, right? And they do that. So that's I think one thing we can look into. Also, the other interest is it enables a degree of freedom that you do not have normally. For instance, if you want to do very close-up, if you want to move inside intricate details, if you want to do some special effects, they are so much easier to achieve with AI and CGI than with real photography. Actually, if you want CGI effects, you need CGI.
For instance, for us in Pixelz, making these AIs and automation is what has enabled us to create the product we call Flow, where we are basically getting images from the studio in a continuous manner and delivering them back. I think the fastest ones we are running with 1 hour retouching, and but delivering them back very, very fast the same day. And of course, for some clients, this is super interesting and super important. But if you do that with traditional retouching and you don't know the volume you're gonna get of images, and suddenly you get 1,000 images and you need to deliver them back within an hour, it's simply not possible. With AI, well, it's a matter of how many computers do we turn on and start running, right? So it also enables some scaling that's simply not possible with traditional post-production.
Right. We've arrived to our final question, which is the following one, interesting one. Can you talk about the ethical implications and consideration that you think about in relation to AI?
Yeah, this
It's a big one.
is definitely a big one. I think we could do probably
A whole
several
webinar.
webinars just about this. But
Right.
yeah, if I were to try to do it a little bit short, I would say there's many things that comes to mind thinking about that. I think, for example, it could be stuff like bias and fairness in AIs. The bias is usually in the data. It's basically with what, for a lot of the chat bots that are out there now, it's what's on the internet, what they've been trained on, right? And fairness, of course, is super important if you are creating an AI product where decisions are being made and so on. I'll also say data privacy and consent, a big issue right now with generative AIs. I don't think anyone knows exactly where that's going to end, but basically a lot of these companies turned the consent upside down and said, now you can say that you don't consent, but as a default, we expect you to consent. And they basically trained these AIs on all the images that are available on the internet. Also, a big thing. Privacy, of course, also, because what can you get out of these? Can you generate stuff that people did not want others to know? I think transparency and explainability, huge thing. In traditional code, we basically write all the different conditions that will end up giving a result. With AIs, we don't do that. So it's basically, I think if I go to Sébastien and say, why was this mask created like this? He can't answer me. We can't debug it back and tell where it's coming from. Job displacement, another big thing. If we are removing jobs that are available today, what are we going to do in the future? I think I could continue. Security, environmental impact is a big thing as well, and yeah, so there's so many things to think about. I think for Pixelz specifically, probably the one, well, we also think about all of these, but one of the big ones, of course, for us would be job displacement, because we are creating these AIs to be more efficient and be able to produce using less manual time, you could say. I would argue that it's also enabling us to create more interesting jobs and jobs that has a higher value, because we're removing some of the low stuff that doesn't need that much experience and creativity and so on, and basically moving the job we ask our retouchers to do to be a little more elevated, you could say. So but definitely a lot of things to think about here. And I'll say I just came back a few weeks ago from the Flow London, and there we had, I guess it's more on the legal side. We had Kelsey, right, a
Kelsey
lawyer, who was
Farish,
talking
yeah.
about and she was talking about the legal aspects, but actually in that there's also a lot of ethical ideas and thoughts and things. So I would definitely also recommend to anyone to go in and check out that session.
Yes, you're right. And there's it's a big topic, and it could be, as we said, a full webinar. But unfortunately, that was our final question for today. So thank you so much, first of all, to Janus and Sébastien for your insights and for sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you, everyone, for watching. If you want to learn more about AI, more about how Pixelz work with AI, we have on demand on our website our webinar that we recently had about AI in e-commerce image editing, and it was with our in-house expert Janus and our CPO Carlos. And also we have many more content to check out on our website. We had previous sessions at previous flow events on the topic with industry professionals that touch upon the topics of AI and the different aspect of it. So go check them out. Also, don't be shy. Keep us asking questions to learn more about Pixelz, about AI, and about all the industry topic you might be interested in learning. So maybe this is just the first episode of many more. And thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And thank you, Janus and Sébastien.
You're welcome.
Thank you too.
Thanks.